Welcome back to the Tech Coach Corner YouTube series presented by Dyknow. As always, I am your host, Tiara Lustig, and today we have a great episode with Dr. Erik Youngman talking about parent, student, and teacher surveys during and after remote learning. Before we jump in, I want to remind you all to subscribe to Dyknow's YouTube channel so that you're getting notified when we post new episodes. We post Tech Coach Corner episodes every Monday and Thursday, so you're getting 2 episodes a week, as well as all of our other videos that are dropping. Last Friday, we hosted our Coaching the Tech Coaches workshop, which is a great workshop all about how to leverage feedback and PLNs to plan for fall 2020. So be sure to check out the recording for that in our YouTube channel as well. Before we jump in, once again, remember to subscribe to the Dyknow YouTube channel and comment with what kind of surveys you're using this summer and going into fall 2020 to gather feedback from teachers, students, and parents. So without further ado, we'll jump into the episode.
Welcome back to Tech Coach Corner, everyone. I'm Tiara Lustig, your host, and I am joined today by Erik Youngman. Erik, do you want to give a brief introduction to yourself?
Welcome. I'm Erik Youngman. I'm the Director of Curriculum, Instruction, and Assessment in Libertyville, Illinois.
Awesome. Well, we're excited to have you with us today. We've worked with Erik in the past on the Tackling Tech podcast, as well as on our recent Professional Development Summit. Erik, one thing we talked to you about on the podcast was completing or putting together parent surveys to assess kind of distance learning and remote learning and how that's going. Could you talk a little bit about parent surveys and how you put those together? I think it's really applicable now that we're kind of at the end of remote learning and needing to gather that feedback to kind of plan for the future.
Communication is critical when we're talking about building trust and understanding. And so you can communicate in a variety of ways. But I think one key way to gather feedback is surveys. I think that teachers can gather feedback from students very informally during the lesson, at the end of lessons, and administrators can gather it from students as well. But I think the two topics that we talk about most is how can we seek input from teachers, parents, and students. And I think remote learning is a perfect situation where we need to gather that feedback. I think if we deliberately craft questions, I think we can determine impactful timing. We can review feedback and use that survey feedback to inform continuous improvement. If we can't communicate with our parents and we are asking them to complete surveys too frequently, they're not going to complete them. So I do think you have to be deliberate about that timing. We created a survey about 3 weeks into remote learning. We talked about gathering feedback at the end of the year or over the summer, and we're actually going to gather feedback over the summer as we wait for additional state guidance. And so I think that will be helpful. Again, people can look at it differently, but if the thought is, really understanding what the timing could be, if we have more time to craft better questions to seek feedback on critical topics, I think that will enhance implementation for everyone. I think the other part is asking questions to provide quantitative data, such as a Likert scale ranking responses. I think that's helpful because you can ask short questions and then you can summarize that data to the school board or to teachers, administrators, or parents. I think that's a good way to gather some basic feedback. But again, I think you can be deliberate about those questions. Also, I think open-ended questions are important to gather that qualitative response and really understand the stories, the different perspectives and impacts to better understand the challenges and also the celebrations, because I have my 3 daughters, and so I'm watching them as they do remote learning. And so that parent perspective is very valuable. It's different for my 4th, 6th, or 8th grader compared to kindergarten. But I mentioned the challenges because we want to ask some questions that talk about what are some of the challenges or what would you change. But I really think an important question also is about what are things that are going well, to talk about celebrations, because teachers are really trying hard right now. I think students are really trying hard right now. So how can we recognize what they're doing well? How can we build off those? Even some of the questions can be open-ended enough where parents can discuss what other school districts are doing. It's great to collaborate and learn from others, but again, if these survey questions are purposeful, they can really give valuable information. And then once that feedback is gathered, You really have to work hard to analyze that data and then be purposeful in say how you are using that data to inform future decisions. Sometimes some of the data is just good to understand, but a lot of it really should help you with future actions. So that's how we've used surveys in general. Again, you have to be cautious and not send out surveys too frequently, but you really have to use that data to show the parents and the students and the teachers that you value their feedback and that you use that feedback to make learning better for their children.
Yeah, I love what you said about especially sharing and encouraging positive feedback. I think during this time of remote learning, teachers are in this new scenario as our students and parents are taking on this whole additional role of kind of being a homeschool teacher or facilitator. So I think sharing that positive feedback with them is really important. One question, so what would you recommend for delivery of surveys to, say, parents and students at home, maybe especially for those who don't have access to as good of internet or maybe aren't on their email as much? How would you recommend sharing out these surveys to gather feedback?
You want to make sure you understand your community and how they can access surveys and other information. With us, our district does have access to email, as do the parents. And so we basically are emailing out the links. We do it multiple times. And then we also add links up in our Twitter posts or Facebook posts, as well as the website. So for our school district, it is working electronically. But again, you might need to be cognizant for other school districts of how you can gather that information. And if a paper survey is a thought, but if you don't want to do that, I think meetings could also accomplish similar things. But for us, we're using electronic surveys via email and Google Forms.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. Well, thank you so much for sharing that information on surveys. I think it's really applicable going into summer as teams are starting to think about how they're going to gather feedback to plan. I know you're on social media. You have a lot of different channels. Let people know where they can find you to engage with you further.
Yeah, Twitter is my primary communication. So at Erik_Youngman is where you can learn with me.
Awesome. And we will put that in our description so people can engage with you. Thank you so much for being with us today, Erik.